much. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here today. Indulge me, please, in a personal favorite prayer of mine, the set-aside prayer. God, please help me to set aside everything I think I know about myself, my alcoholism, the big book, the steps, the people in AA, the message I delivered today, all spiritual things, and even you, God. I ask this so I may have a truly open mind and a new experience with all these things. Please help me to see the truth. Amen. I am John McCune. I'm a very grateful, recovered alcoholic. It is only through my relationship with God and the inherent presence of His grace, the 12 steps, the big book, attendance at committed closed AA step or literature meetings, a committed home group with a service position, a consistent and persistent dedication to my primary purpose, carrying the AA message to the still suffering alcoholic. It is only through these dynamics that I have been free of alcohol and any mind or mood altering substances since March 24th of 1980, and for that I am eternally grateful. My home group is the newly founded Tradition 5 Big Book study, which is patterned directly after the primary purpose groups of Austin and Dallas. We use the Big Book study guide. It has proven to be a rousing success here in our area. Last week we had 22 people there. It's really great to be a part of that. Thank you to Penny for the invitation here today. I've never met Penny personally, and if I went into our lineage of how we met, it would take up half the time here today. But I absolutely love the dynamics of the Zoom presence in AA, that it has afforded me so much with so many people. I started a men's group at the onset of COVID. We've met over 248 successive weeks. It's still going strong, and we get a good crew there. So Penny, thank you so much for the invitation. And at Penny's suggestion, and as I would normally do, I've tried to attend this meeting a few times since being asked to speak here, to kind of get a flavor for the level of tolerance for humor that the group has. I only made half of Kevin's speech talk last week, and you you're probably not as stoic as I may think, but I am a storyteller, and frankly a smart aleck, as I've been told since I was first grade. I didn't want to step on any toes, and before I pen an open talk, and I always try and do a different talk each time. Not a big Drunkalog fan. My sponsor said, if you do that, we'll never ask you to speak again. I want to hear about a common problem very briefly. I want to hear about the common solution at great length. So in that spirit, I want to open with a little story that really sets the tone for this talk. I was walking through my neighborhood one day, and there's a neighbor that has about 3.5 acres of lawn, and I saw him bent over clipping the grass with a pair of manicure scissors, and I found that quite odd. I approached him and I said, "Why would you undertake such a massive job with such a small tool?" And his response was precise and to the point. He said, "That's all there is. There ain't no more." And I thought, that is kind of how I survived in AA for many, many years. I was very much a don't drink and go to meetings guy. I could be that guy, approaching sobriety with very small tools. And just say, well, I quit drinking, so that's all there is. There ain't no more. And how wrong I was about that. And I found that out mostly through really fabulous sponsorship and all you folks in meetings. At a retreat that I attended in 1980, so I am really raw, I'm really fresh. And there was a treatment center in Detroit, Sacred Heart, that was run by Father Vaughn Quinn. Many of you may have heard him speak before. But he pointed out that if you take any number, let's say 100 people that come into Alcoholics Anonymous, get sober and stay sober and die sober, only 20 of them will get every bit of the spirituality and freedom that the steps offer. And I vowed at that point that I would be one of the 20%. Frankly, I think I only began that pursuit in earnest about 10 years ago. Yes, I remain sober. I continued to practice the 5 basics, but I believe I missed the real juice available to me in the steps, the traditions, and the concepts. Sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. But today, I want the entire Happy Meal. I am no longer willing to settle for just the McNuggets. About 10 years ago or so, I learned how to read our big book in a whole different fashion. I put my name in the pages. I read it first person. I will take statements and turn them into questions, and this will be evident as we go along. This is a talent I learned through my exposure to the primary purpose group. As Kevin said here last week, first and last names that I say, these will be deceased members, previous sponsors, and all others will have their anonymity protected using first names only. If you are even remotely familiar with Charlie Parker from Austin, Texas, his message will bleed through my words here today. Some of them are outright stolen. But as he taught me, once I give credit 3 times for a quote, it's mine from now on. So instead of saying Joe Schmo told me such and such, I simply state, like I always say. So by means of qualifying, I rewrote the doctor's opinion. And in my book, the doctor's opinion reads like this. John McCune drinks essentially because he likes the effect produced by alcohol. The sensation is so elusive that while John admits it is injurious, John cannot after a time differentiate the true from the false. To John, his alcoholic life seems the only normal one. John is restless, irritable, and discontented unless he can again experience the sense of ease and comfort which comes at once by taking a few drinks, drinks which John sees other taking with impunity. After John has succumbed to the desire again, as he often does, and the phenomenon of craving develops, John passes through the well-known stages of a spree, emerging remorseful with a firm resolution not to drink again. This is repeated over and over, and unless John can experience an entire psychic change, there is very little hope of John's recovery. On the other hand, and strange as this may seem to those who do not understand, once a psychic change has occurred, the very same John who seemed doomed, who had so many problems he despaired of ever solving them, suddenly finds himself easily able to control his desire for alcohol, the only effort necessary being that required to follow a few simple rules. Now that explains how I drank. That explains why I drank. Most importantly today, without the maintenance and growth of a spiritual experience offered through the 12 steps, it's why I may drink again. I'm here to tell you folks, I'm all done drinking. I do believe that the best indicator of future performance is past relevant behavior. If I keep doing the things that you folks tell me to do, I'm all done. Now, the fact that I am the youngest of 5 kids from a lower Midwest Catholic family, the fact that my oldest sister was a Dominican nun for 22 years, the fact that my father was a salesman and mom stayed home to raise us, The fact that I attended Catholic school for 12 years. The fact that I never attended kindergarten. The fact that I worked in retail grocery for 45 years. The fact that when I set the volume on my TV volume or the cruise in my car, it always has to be an even number. None of that has anything to do with my alcoholism. Silky wrote the doctor's opinion all about me before I was even born. And I love when I hear that observation in the rooms. As I said, I like to write an open talk with a different theme each time I present one, and today is no different. While watching a clip from an old favorite TV show, the character made mention of fortune cookie politics, essentially condensing down the party's message to cliche-like phrases and keeping it understandable to their members. I seized upon that idea, figuring I could use this forum as a place to air my displeasure at some of the things I have heard in meetings. Heck, I've even said some of these things. Don't drink and go to meetings. Meeting makers make it. Don't drink no matter what. From my 4.5 years in Oregon, this was their big one. Don't drink even if your butt falls off. All that tells me is all those are self-will driven. But through the process of praying about this, my heart was turned. The original premise I had would be nothing more than using this medium as a bully pulpit, an ego-feeding display of a selfish agenda, and I abandoned it on the spot. My heart was turned. Instead, I've decided to focus on the things I hear in meetings, in workshops, retreats that have also turned my heart. Things so convincing in their simplicity and nature that even Johnny can understand them and internalize them. There's one or more fortune cookie for each step, so let's get started with fortune cookie sobriety. Step 1, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. The fortune cookie, the truth is, there's a bottom below. The bottom, I know. I am by no means immune to alcohol and the allergy I have against it. Drinking cures the mental obsession. Not drinking cures the allergy. Drinking activates the allergy, but not drinking activates the mental obsession. So where does that leave me? The second fortune cookie of step 1, my life was saved and changed by seconds and inches. I can barely say that line that I have said hundreds of times without just getting overwhelmed emotionally. Think about that. Saved and changed seconds and inches. And if that resonates in someone else's life, then they are in the right place. If anything can bring on the gratitude, it's that very simple observation. Again, so where does that leave me? Step 2, came to believe that a power greater than myself could restore me to sanity. The fortune cookie, change my mind. I was asked 2 questions back in 1980 when I traveled across the state to meet with a family friend priest to do my 3rd step. And Father Fitz had gotten up, went across the room and got a box of Kleenex, came back and set it on the table next to me. And then he sat back down. I said, sorry, Fitz, I won't need that. And he said, that's all right. I just put it there in case. And he said, I've got 2 questions for you. Do you believe in God? And I said, well, absolutely I do. And he said, okay, does God believe in you? I lost control. I bawled my eyes out because the answer, frankly, was no. So I was told to change my mind. Anytime I question lofty ideas about God, nature, the universe, I simply have to change my mind. And then I finally read about this in the 12 and 12 sometimes, some years later. I am not alone. Step 3, made a decision to turn my will and my life over to the care of God as I understand him. The fortune cookie, all subsequent steps will refer directly back to the body of work on pages 60 to 63 and how earnestly I have made that decision. Picture a route map at an airport that serves as a hub for an airline. Can you see it? All the lines going out from the hub, going to Salt Lake City, Denver, Seattle. I now see so many references in the big book, pages 58 to 103, that tie directly back to that piece of work in step 3. The second fortune cookie of step 3 is that phrase that I heard Father Quinn say over and over and over at that retreat. Pages 58 to 103, 58 to 103, 58 to 103. 45 pages that say that if I do exactly, precisely what it outlines in those 45 pages, I'll never again know the horror of active alcoholism. And of course, he went on and said, can you imagine if there were 45 pages that would eradicate cancer? Would anyone hedge at doing exactly what's in those pages? And the answer, of course, is no. They beat a path to our door. Step 4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of myself. The fortune cookie, the purpose of the fourth step is to bring out the good in me. But how? I didn't understand it. I was told that through this process of uncovering, discovering, and discarding old ideas and attitudes and replacing them with the spiritual consciousness and the presence of God. Now, I'm here to tell you that without incredible sponsorship, then, since, and even today, I cannot navigate the steps by myself. Giving me the big book and expecting me to get it is like handing me the flight manual to an F-16 fighter jet. 541 pages long. Yeah, I Googled that. And then handing it to me and say, read this. And when you're done, we've got one out here on the Pacific Coast Highway. Try not to hurt yourself or anyone else. I have always needed someone with a considerable amount of experience with these steps to help me walk through them. And of course, the wonderful thing about Alcoholics Anonymous is once I went through those steps, the real juice is being able to turn and give this to yet another man who comes through our doors. Step 5, admitted to God, to myself, and to another human being the exact nature of my wrongs. The fortune cookie, this comes right out of the 12 and 12. I read this for years until I finally read it. It said I still suffered many of the old pangs of anxious apartness. What a powerful phrase, anxious apartness. One definition of pang is a sharp attack of mental anguish. I'm sure many of us here are able to relate to the feeling of being alone in a crowd. Well, it promises that ends right here after step 5. It didn't happen my first swing through, probably not even my 4th or 5th swing through. But I kept digging and I kept digging. And finally, it happened. I heard a speaker say one time, I go into a crowd and the first thing I do is I compare my inside to your outside. And I always lose. Even if I feel superior to the people around me, it's a false sense because fact is there's nobody better than me and there's nobody worse than me. I heard a speaker say, God's in first place. The rest of us, we're tied for second. And that's a struggle I deal with every day. Another fortune cookie is step 5. I'm not much, but I'm all I think about. Years ago, I sat in my old home group up in East Lansing, Michigan, and Samantha, a dear friend, said that in a step 5 meeting. And I turned to my sponsor, Fred, and I said, that is so profound. I'm not much, but I'm all I think about. And he looked at me and he said, where have you been? She says that every 12 weeks when we're on step 5. So it was just another indication of I don't know how many times I have to hear something before I finally hear it. Step 6, we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. The fortune cookie is the essence of step 6 is willingness and powerlessness. It says we have emphasized willingness as being indispensable. Am I now ready to let God remove from me all the things which I have admitted are objectionable? Can he now take them all, every one? If I still cling to something that I will not let go, I ask God to help me be willing. Again, I see this as a line drawn straight back to the decision in step 3. Another fortune cookie here, when the book says, I ask, it's usually a prayer. When the book says, we ask God, it's always a prayer. I had never thought about it that way. We were highlighting our big books for the Tradition 5, trying to highlight all the prayers. And when you put it into this formula, you're doing a lot of highlighting because the book is full of them. Step 7, humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. The fortune cookie, sometimes when I am faced with an active shortcoming, I need to do 2 things. I need to ask for help, and then I have to knock it the heck off. Lisa C. from that same meeting up in East Lansing said one time, when I am actively in a defect of character, I got to get on my knees. I have to ask God for help, and then I got to knock it off. And I thought, well, that's not what the step says. But in the 12 and 12, one of my favorite passages is, but again, I am driven by the inescapable conclusion which I draw from AA experience that I surely must try with a will or fall by the wayside. That right there tells me I've got some skin in this game. Now, back in step 6, I had to learn to do some basic things. Rest, nourish, hydrate. And I need to take care of this physical plant called John McCune. My sponsor called me at work one day, and again, I was in retail grocery. He said, how you doing? I'm having a bad day. And he said, oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Again, what have you consumed today? Well, I had 10 cups of coffee, 4 glazed donuts, and a half a pack of Camel non-filter cigarettes. And he went, oh my, we're bringing a good blank palette to God to work with today, aren't we? I was an emotional, physical, spiritual mess. But, once I learned how to do those things, once I learned how to ask for help and knock it off, which most of the time just means nothing comes out of the mouth. Nothing comes out. We'll address that in step 11. Step 8, made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. The fortune cookie, well, Wilson uses the word all twice in one sentence. So I have to ask myself, what does all mean to me? And I asked I asked my sponsor, Bob Bentley, God rest his soul. He was a communication professor at the local community college. And I said, um, why do you think Wilson used the word all twice in one sentence? And he goes, well, let's revisit 6, where we talk about defects of character, 7, shortcomings. Wilson just didn't want to use the same term twice. They're essentially the same thing. Now, why he used the word all twice in the 8th step, he said, you figure it out, John. It might be important. And indeed it was, as I made my 8-step list. And I tell guys that I work with, if you work the steps with me, 4 and 8 are going to be separate events. But when I made that list and sat down with Bob and went through it, he said, you need to be willing to make amends to all these folks, except this one. And he crossed off an old girlfriend. And he said, and except this one, and he crossed off another old girlfriend. And he said, and not this one, and he crossed off another old girlfriend. The only females left on my 8-step list were my 2 sisters that were still alive. I realized the wisdom in that. Today, a thing I've learned through primary purpose is we work with amends cards. Every person on the 8-step gets a 3x5 card. The name, contact information, and the date that they will meet. And then it has bullet points. This is how I feel I have harmed you. Have I harmed you in any other manner? Do you need to tell me how you feel about this? And what, if anything, am I able to do today to heal this relationship? The most important part is after each bullet point, it says, be still and listen. Because I'm the guy that wants to be talking. The most incredible 9-step experience I ever had was with my late sister, Marilyn. I traveled to Springfield, Illinois, about a 6-hour drive, to spend 3 or 4 days with she and her family. I did my 9th step with her, and she said, Johnny, 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 no, it's fine. It's fine. You're back to being sweet little, nice little Johnny. Everything's fine. Well, you fast forward a year. And she called and said, Joe and the kids and I are coming through Lansing on our way up North Michigan. Could I get a few hours of your time? And I said, absolutely, this would be great. And through the course of talking to Bob, I said, oh, hey, by the way, my sister's coming through and she wants to see me. And he said, uh-oh. And I said, what? He said, this might be a revisit of step 9. No, she said, everything's fine. And he said, you better get out a piece of paper, right at the top of it, 8-step list. Write down Marilyn Harris and pray for the willingness. I did it because I do what I'm told. Nobody in AA has ever told me to do anything that was bad for me. So I followed directions. We sat down, we talked cordially for maybe 8 minutes. And then she took me apart. How dare you bring that disease into my house, around my children, my husband, my dog. And I let her talk. And when she got done, I said, I am so sorry that happened between us. What can I do? And she said, just let me. And she lit into it again. I am so glad that I had and still have strong sponsorship. So step 9, made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. The fortune cookie, if I am seeking forgiveness, I must first offer forgiveness. I need to offer forgiveness to others and to myself. This is where I face others about myself as well as face myself and what the book calls my dark past. The book says, cling to the thought that in God's hands, the dark past is the greatest possession you have. The key to life and happiness for others. What? With it, you can avert death and misery for them. You know, I'm not a downer guy, but I consistently remind people in the rooms that this is a matter of life and death. Another fortune cookie in step 9 is my dark past is no longer an autobiography. It has now become a reference book to be taken down and freely shared. What a powerful, powerful observation. And I'm one of the guys that came to Alcoholics Anonymous so ridden with guilt and shame. And then I learned, and this is true for me, guilt is a feeling that I have done something bad. Shame for me is I am a bad person, top to bottom, side to side, front to back. That is not the case. Vaughn Quinn at that retreat said, the grace of God is an umbrella that we all have directly overhead. And if I am unwilling to forgive myself, I remove myself from underneath that umbrella and put myself on top. We need to learn how to forgive ourselves. Step 10, continue to take personal inventory, and when I was wrong, promptly admit it. The fortune cookie, the step says when, not if I was wrong. And my sponsor, Kim, used to point this out all the time. When we were wrong. The steps are written keeping in mind that I am going to make errors, mistakes, plain old blunders. But the practicing of this step, as Bob kept telling me, allows me to pump the brakes, as it were, before saying or doing a lot of things that are going to get me in touch with people. It's going to create a situation that I'm going to have to clean up later. It takes a lot of practice, a lot of practice. And I learned through making blunders and going directly to the person in the moment to make amends with the entirely wrong motive. One time I said something at a table and Margie got up and ran out of the coffee shop. Well, I got right up and my friend Jane said, where are you going? I said, well, I have to go make amends. And she said, no, leave Margie alone. And I said, no, it's 10 steps, Jane, come on. And she said, what do you think she's going to say to you? I said, well, she'll probably say, don't worry about it. She said, no. She might not say anything like that. She might really be angry. Are you prepared to listen to whatever she has to say? And the answer honestly was, heck no. I just want her to forgive me. So it's taken a lot of practice. And as far as the word promptly, my second sponsor, Bob Bentley, told me when I said, okay, so promptly admitted it, what does that mean? He goes, that means by noon tomorrow. I said, noon tomorrow? Where did you get that? He said, I just now made it up. Thanks, Bob. He was my sponsor for many years, and he put up with my antics, poor attitude. And ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you, you go to Lansing, Michigan, to one of the Alano clubs and say, who's the prince of self-pity? Right here. Oh, I just loved self-pity. And so much so that I walked into the coffee shop one time before the 8 p.m. meeting, and I was probably 20 feet away from Jan Marison, who was the club manager. And she looked up from behind the counter and she said, oh my God, what is it now? Just from the way I walked into the room. Well, the problem du jour was the stylus on my turntable had broken They were $14 and I couldn't afford to replace my stylus. And how was I going to get along without my music? And that woman looked at me and she said, John, when are you going to understand that the worst thing that could possibly ever happen to you has already happened? Man, that turned to my heart in that moment. And I lived on that for a lot of years. A lot has happened since then. I was married. I have two incredibly beautiful children. If something were to happen to one of my children, I don't know that the worst thing that could ever possibly happen to me in my life has happened to me. But I have sat in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous and I watch you people. You get married, you get divorced, you have children, you bury your dead, you go bankrupt, you hit the lottery. You do it all without picking up a drink. You gave me those tools. And on a side note, I just spent a week with my son from Austin, who was 2.5 years clean and sober. And he facilitated that meeting Wednesday night with me. And I've got a picture of that. I'll tell you, it is the most fabulous thing. Step 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve my conscious contact with God as I understood him, praying only for knowledge of his will for me and the power to carry that out. You know, one of the fortune cookies in that step, and Bob pointed this out to me, it says in the 12 and 12, we feel the entire range of our needs is met in the phrase, the knowledge of God's will for me and the power to carry it out. Man, that really distills it down pretty simply. Another fortune cookie, and this I read in a interview with Sam Shoemaker, who was a close personal friend of Bill W.'s and helped develop the steps. He said, you know, prayer comes in two flavors, a dull habit or an acute fever. And that got my attention because I used to get up from asking for help in the morning and an hour later think, did I do that? Was that? I know I got on my knees. Did I do the 7-step prayer? Did I do I no longer judge myself on how my prayers feel on any given day. As many other steps ask, am I simply willing to take the action? The second fortune cookie in step 11, and Charlie Parker, I loved you, man. You were so influential. He talks about the PARS, the PARS in step 11, that I pause when agitated or doubtful. Then I ask for the right thought or action. Then I remind myself I am no longer running the show. And then I humbly say to myself many times each day, thy will be done. I've had this discussion with my spouse. She's a civilian. She's a brilliant woman. And she goes, I don't like that you don't say what you think. And I said, honey, when we're talking about this or that or the other, talk to you all day long. But when it's you or one of your kids, I got to put it through PARS. And I get agitated. Now, I love Chad P's thing about I am often agitated. I am rarely doubtful. I know I got a take on this, and it's the way I see it. But when I'm agitated or doubtful, I have to stop. And then I ask for the right thought or action. Well, I'm already in the right thought. I'm doing what the book says. I'm asking for help. But the right thought is there. The right action is always the same. Do nothing, say nothing. And for a guy like me, that's tough. But it's practice and practice and practice. And then I go, okay, I'm not running the show. That director guy in step 3, pages 60 to 60, that's me. I got to get everything just such as Charlie says, I'm trying to create John Topia here. Why aren't you all getting on the bus? And truth is, no, nobody wants to get on the bus. And then I just say, I will be done. This is also the step with precise instructions for nightly review. We'll come back to that. Step 12, part 1, having had a spiritual awakening as, you ready? The result. It's not a result, it is the result. The fortune cookie is one result of these steps is a spiritual awakening. I'm able to face life today no matter what may occur without taking a drink, a drug, or engaging in any other self-destructive behaviors. I got a boatload of them. Part 2 of step 12, I tried to carry this message to alcoholics. The fortune cookie here is when I am asked to serve, the answer is always yes. There is a man in this new Wednesday night meeting. I had never met him before. And he's kind of bristly, okay? Been around a long time. And he came over to me, he's walking across the room, and I'm thinking, oh my God, don't ask me to sponsor you. He said, can I see you out in the hall for a minute? We went out in the hall and he said, would you be willing to sponsor me? And I was awash in grace. And I said, absolutely. I would be honored to work with you. This is like 3 months ago, and we're really good friends. And it's that thing of it was said in the meeting before the meeting, right? Contempt prior to investigation. But I try and keep myself out of the way. I love Bobby D's thing of when I'm in that space, there is way too much of me between me and you, and way too much of me between me and God. So I cannot carry this message if I'm not in the rooms, if I don't answer my phone, and if I don't call my sponsors. The fortune cookie here is I need to be in Alcoholics Anonymous, not at Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm going to say that one more time. I need to be in AA, not at AA. AA is not a place. Part 3, and to practice these principles in all my affairs. The fortune cookie here is, would I want anyone else to do my 11th step nightly review? And what would that look like? I'll be on my phone. I do my 11th step nightly review with 4 other men in Alcoholics Anonymous every single night. And sometimes my wife Bethany will say, would you like me to do that for you? And the answer is no, I got it covered. I got it covered. So it's easy to do in the rooms sometimes, harder in public, and it can be really tough at home. I need to stay centered and in fit spiritual condition. And as my spouse, Bethany, will remind me, that means always and all ways. As I am here today with you all, believe me when I tell you, I stand on the shoulders of spiritual giants. My sponsorship lineage is quite colorful, and frankly, when I stop to think about it, it's unbelievable. My mentor in AA was a woman named Jane Andrews. She appointed my male sponsors. She oversaw my progress. Her sponsor was a man named Frank Malloy, who was a close personal friend of Bill Wilson's. They used to sit at the lunch counter in New York together. Then there's Bob Bentley, Kim, and today, Brad, Fred, Mark. I had 3 sponsors. Now, primary purpose will say, you're shopping for advice. No, I'm not. Brad knows Fred, Fred knows Mark, Mark knows Brad. I don't shop for advice. They're my A team. I can go to them with anything, and I am always directed back to God, to the book, and ultimately to myself. Allow me to close with a couple more things. The spiritual question is this. I have a hard time getting through this. The spiritual question is this: does my life out there in the world give any evidence of an encounter with God? And does this encounter bring about in me any of the things described as the fruit of the Spirit? These would be love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, trustfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Am I different from my surroundings, or do I reflect the predictable cultural biases and values of my group? That's a heavy-duty question. I could not have gotten from where I was to where I am without the spirituality and the discipline of the 12 steps. I'm a real crusader for Alcoholics Anonymous, especially now since I have a son who is in the rooms. So believe me when I tell you that if you get active in AA, you're going to have arrows in your back and you're never going to know where they're coming from. Don't worry about it. The big book says, keep on the firing line of life with these motives and God will keep you unharmed. The last I knew, the only people getting shot at are the ones on the front line. Don't worry about it. We must maintain this program as it has been passed on to us for our children, for their children, and their children. Please do not allow it to be watered down. Also, please remember this. We are all here now. What occurs in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous is an immense thing. It is an immense thing. We are able to share our journeys along this road to recovery. And whatever shortfalls I have had with these steps in my life, no matter what failures I've had in the past or in the future for that matter, these steps, this program of Alcoholics Anonymous, is where we can stand together and where no one gets left behind. No one gets left behind. Finally, there has never been a more important time in history for us to be really good at what we do. Please continue. Thank you very much. Thank you.